Hello, I'm Andy Burke and this is the Scottish Football Podcast. All the news, views and analysis you need on Tuesday the 13th of January. And today we're focusing on what's happening in the Championship and Leagues 1 and 2. A big win for Ross County had consequences at both ends of the Championship table. Can the Staggies finally build some momentum? And does defeat for Partick Thistle deal a blow to their title challenge? Meanwhile, Arbroath continue to punch above their weight. Will they finish in the top four? In League One, a rampant Stenhousemuir are pulling away from the pack. And can a faltering Inverness rediscover their mojo? In League Two, can East Kilbride make up the ground on Spartans? And Edinburgh City, can they lift themselves off the bottom? Stay with us as we go beyond the Premiership.
The Scottish Football Podcast from BBC Sports Scotland.
Well, delighted to have your company this morning. Delighted to be joined by Scott Fraser, the Ross County midfielder. Good morning, Scott. I guess things are feeling a little bit better around the club after that victory on Friday night.
Yeah, definitely. Was over the moon when I was asked to come on after that point. Gave me something good to speak about. I thought, as you say, the mood's really positive. There's two tough games we've had now against the top two, and 2 clean sheets, 4 points. As you say, hopefully that can be the sort of start now where we can really push on.
And no doubt in a positive mood this morning. Craig Telfer, a view from the terrace presenter with Stenny going along very nicely indeed, Craig.
Yes, the team are playing very well at the moment. A really, really good performance on Saturday against East Fife. 5-0 win, didn't flatter Stenny at all. And that's the team taking 10 points out of the last 12, 0 goals conceded. So they're in a really, really good place just now. Good place to be.
I'll keep some of your killer stats because we'll get on to Stenny. But let's start with that win on Friday night for Ross County, Scott. And as we said at the top there, it's been such a tough time for the club. Stuart Kettlewell's come in and you really needed that win, didn't you? And couldn't go off to a better start, really. A new manager, 18 seconds and his team got on the score sheet. I mean, it was a perfect start, wasn't it?
Yeah, it's actually probably cliche, but it's something we spoke about sort of all week, was getting that fast start. I don't think anybody quite anticipated it being that fast. I think that's the way that he wants us to play. I'll be honest, we've not been able to do too much, obviously, because of the weather. We've been indoors pretty much since its second day in. And you can't get too much done. So in terms of like shape and, that tactical point, we've done a lot of sort of video work. And yeah, a lot of his team talks was just about trying to get that fast start, trying to sort of put pressure on their back line. I think you see the first goal certainly comes from that. It's a bit messy to begin with, and then it falls to wee Hendo on the edge of the box, and he's got two good feet, to be fair to him, so when it falls to his left you always fancy him. And then the second one, kind of shows you again what the gaffer's about in terms of getting one striker at least in behind, again, to try and stretch that back line. KP should probably score the first one, but Hendo does really well to follow up and put that one in. And I think from that point on we were comfortable without being in control of the game. I think Partick had the one sort of chance when they've hit the bar. They obviously think they should score, but I think in terms of Partick as a side, they're a tricky team to play against. They've got good rotations, good 1v1 players, and I think we kept them quiet for the most spells of the game. I think in the end it was probably a comfortable 2-0 win. But we've always said the biggest thing now is that can we push on from it?
Yeah, and I suppose, Craig, Stuart Kettlewell will have his own ideas tactically about what he wants to do with Ross County, but the biggest thing, I suppose, is just injecting a bit of confidence into the team at this moment in time.
I think so. It's actually quite nice to come on this podcast and talk about Ross County positively for a change.
Yeah.
I think we've been quite critical of them over the course of the season, but that was a huge win. I think Scott summed up the game very well. That was my exact impressions from it, from watching it on Friday night. I thought that on the whole, I thought Ross County were just really good. It was probably the best performance of the season. I think outside the chance it fell to like Sosa and then Alex Samuel, Thistle didn't really offer much, but I think that's because County stood up to them really well and were able to keep them at arm's length for the course of the match. And I don't think that Kettlewell coming in there has done anything too revelatory, but I think playing players in the correct position is perhaps a good step That's something that Tony Docherty wasn't doing. And I think it's just a case, it's been a good weekend as well, with Airdrieonians only picking up a point, Queen's Park not playing. I think it sets down a marker for Ross County, that you've set the standard over the course of the season. It's just been able to build in that, kick on and move away from the foot of the table. They certainly got the players that can do it. It's just the club doesn't appear to be in a good place at the moment, so hopefully that can change, and that win is just a huge... It's got a huge galvanising effect on the players and everyone else associated with them.
Yeah, and Scott, I mean, you're now only 2 points behind Queen's Park. Next up is Airdrie away. That seems to be a massive game, and you'll hope to carry that confidence forward into such an important game.
Yeah, exactly that. As we said, sort of the St Johnstone game at home is a good benchmark as well for particularly the defensive side of the game. You know, closing spaces, denying loads of opportunities. Against St Johnstone, up until the last sort of 10 minutes, didn't cause us too many problems. Partick the same, so that's the two top teams. It's now about, you know, just because we're playing a team close to us down the bottom league doesn't mean that any changes from our point of view. You know, we go into every game, and to be fair to the gaffer, he's been bang on with that again since the day he come in about, listen, we're in that position where we are, we deserve to be there. But we're more than good enough to get out of it. You know, we've shown that in glimpses this season, albeit we've not shown it in a sort of a consistent basis. So that's something that we'll definitely be looking to do. It'll be a tough game because Airdrie fans said they've been in a decent run of form themselves, but it's definitely one that we're going there looking to catch them.
Well, it was a victory that had consequences at both ends of the table, Craig. A real blow for Partick Thistle and a real boost for St Johnstone.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've been keeping an eye on the top of the championship over the course of the season. I think that Partick Thistle, since getting the wins against St Johnstone and against Dunfermline Athletic that took them top of the table and tied them with St Johnstone on points, since then they haven't really kicked on, and they haven't really been able to put any sustained pressure on it. I think that other than those two victories, the last time they won and recently was against Greenock Morton last week, when they came back from 2-0 to draw 3-2. I just feel in that match, the kind of players that you'd be looking for to really have a spark for you, guys like Tony Watt and Logan Chalmers and Solana Litsosa, they didn't really get in the match. In fact, Tony Watt was subbed off. It's not nice to say, but you only realised he was in the pitch when he was actually coming off at the end, because County were able to deal with him so well. And I think on top of that, losing Oisin Smith, who's gone back to St Mirren, that's going to be a big blow for them, because he played such an important role for Thistle. He basically just acted as a screen for the defence and allowed the more attack-minded players to just go on and do their thing with security. So I think that's something Mark Wilson and Alex Sale need to do coming up, is to try and find another ball-winning, destructive midfielder that can give them the same sort of presence as Smith can. So it's quite a difficult thing to do, is to try and, one, not lose heart that they've slipped away from St Johnstone, they've not made up the gap, and then two, just try and find a player that can do something similar to Smith.
Well, Arbroath, another good weekend for them, Scott. 3-2 winners against Raith and Kirkcaldy, and they're having a terrific season, third in the table, and you know, you've got to say they've probably overachieved this season. They're going along so well.
They are. I don't think it's a surprise anymore, though, for how well they've done. You know, I think they've beaten, if not every team in the league, then certainly close to. I think they're everybody's second favourite team, aren't they? One of those. But I must say, even when they come up to our place a couple of weeks ago, for a part-time side, they're so well organised, they're so fit, they're intense with their press. They know the time to press, when to set off the game. We kind of struggled to really break them down with a couple of chances in the game, but struggled to create anything clear cut because of how well organised they were. I think the last 15 games, only St Johnstone have picked up more points, so that kind of tells you in itself how well they're doing. And they're up there definitely on merit. You know, people keep saying, "Oh, they would have fell away by now," but I think they're here to stay definitely. And David Gold and Colin Hamilton deserve so much credit for it, along with the players.
Well, Ayr United drew at home to Airdrie, and as Scott said earlier, Craig, Airdrie have really started to find a bit of form. They've only lost once since the end of November. They seem to be just kind of digging out the results they need at the moment.
Yeah, I think that getting Aaron Taylor-Sinclair in from the interim to the permanent manager is a really good move. I think that when they brought Danny Lennon in, I think a lot of people were sceptical as to how that would work. Sadly, I think a lot of people's expectations were met with that and he moved on. But Aaron Taylor-Sinclair has had a really good, I'm going to use the term again, like a galvanising effect in the group of players. And I think he's made things quite simple for them. The team under him, they don't look as ponderous in the ball. They look a lot more aggressive. And I think that's paying dividends. They were perhaps a little bit lucky against Ayr United at the weekend. There, Anton Dowds forgot his shooting boots and could have had a hat trick based on the chances that he failed to put away. But I think that Airdrie are in a good place at the moment. There's a couple of exciting young players there. I think Gavin Gallagher's coming on to a good game. Ewan Henderson scoring goals on a semi-consistent basis. I think they could do with another striker in the transfer window, but I think a lot of clubs could do, right across the country, could do with another striker in the transfer window. But if they can get something like that involved, I think they might have enough about them to finish in 8th place maybe.
Yeah, I remember Derek McInnes telling me that he's never in his managerial career gone into a transfer window and not been looking for a striker. I think, Scott, every team in the country would take a goal scorer if they were going in January, wouldn't they?
Absolutely. I think that's why they get paid the most money and that's why they cost them the much as well. I think in terms of Airdrie as well, the boy McMaster for them is really important. Again, just from going off playing against them just a few weeks back, I know he's a young lad, but how controlled he is in his game, how much he dictates the tempo for them, knows when to play in behind, knows when to play to feet. I think a lot of what they do when they do it well goes through him. I think they've drawn their last 3 in the league, am I right, with that? So it keeps them, as I said, very much in touch with ourselves in Queen's Park, and we do both have games in hand on them as well. So it's a case of, do you want the 2 points extra on the board or do you want the 2 games in hand? We feel confident at the minute with our position, with the games in hand that we've got. As you say, playing Airdrie on Saturday, it'll be two hard games.
Right, Craig, the moment you've been waiting for. Let's get into League One. Stenhousemuir riding high at the top of the table. Have you got the open top bus booked for the end of the season already?
It's you know something. It's the club are in a really good place on the pitch at the moment. The team are playing really well. There's no weaknesses in the squad. We're talking about where we'd like to strengthen in January. I don't actually think the club need to do any business in the transfer window because everything's in such a positive place at the moment. As you mentioned at the top of the show, the last 4 matches, they've taken on the 3 best teams in the division in Inverness, Caledonian Thistle, Alloa, Queen of the South, and then East Fife at the weekend. But that's no goals conceded. The defence is absolutely rock tight. You're scoring goals on a consistent basis. Ross Taylor, perhaps the most informed player in the division at the moment. And well, I don't think anyone's like getting too carried away because I think there's the acceptance that Inverness, Caledonian Thistle they're in a bit of a slump at the moment. They're ultimately going to win the division. Just got to keep on winning as many games as possible and putting as many points on the board and making things as difficult as them to try and catch up. I think it was a really good weekend, both in terms of the Warriors winning and Inverness, Caledonian Thistle dropping points. But the performance against East Fife, once the team scored, some of the play was excellent. Scott McGill, I don't know if you had any chance to see the highlights, but Scott McGill makes a pass from the centre circle. It takes 6 players out of the game for Ross Taylor to run on to and finish. Dale Carrick comes on the pitch, his first touch, an absolutely thumping header for the 4th goal. Nicky Jameson, horrendous spell out with injury, scored last week against Queen of the South, scores again at the weekend. So it's a manager you love. Just him being at the club and everything he's done for a group of players you're just delighted to watch, and there's just such a great relationship between the people on the pitch, the people in the stands. It's great. Like since Gary Naismith's coming, it's as good as it's ever been. I keep saying this every time we talk about Stenny, but it's true. It's just it's so much fun following the boys at the moment.
Yeah, Scott, you know things are good at a football club when one of the club supporters says we don't need to do any business in January. How many football fans say that about their team?
Nah, you're quite many. I think what Craig says there in terms of the manager, I've spoken about it before when I've been on these shows, is that I don't know him personally, but I'm such a big fan of him. Just through his interviews, how positive and how sort of enthusiastic he seems and sounds about his club and players. Not just that, I done my UEFA B licence down in England through the English FA, but I know a lot of boys up here who have done it through the SFA, and he actually comes in on the course and speaks about like the role of a part-time manager and has like 10-15 minutes with the boys afterwards, and every single person I've spoke to a good few, talk so highly of him. Again, how much enthusiasm he puts into his talk that he delivers about being a part-time manager, and then how long he spends afterwards, talking to boys and giving them little bits of insight. And that I think he comes across so well. So I'm hopeful that they can go and have a really successful season. Unfortunately, I kind of agree with Craig, and that Inverness will come strong again.
Yeah, but the table is so intriguing at the top, Craig, isn't it? Obviously, Stenny 3 points clear, Inverness 2 games in hand, but Queen of the South are up there as well, only 3 points off the top, and Alloa only another 4 points back. They've got a game in hand over Queen of the South and Stenny. It's really fascinating at the top of League One at the moment.
Yeah, it is. I mean, you can briefly touch on all those teams. Partick Thistle, it was mentioned there, that ultimately the favourites to go on and win it, but they're just in a bit of a slump at the moment. They've only taken 1 point from the last 3 matches, and they could have lost against Queen of the South at the weekend. Mitch Megginson missed a 1-on-1, hit the post, and they had a penalty that they missed right at the end of the match. Ross Monroe made a good save from that, so it could have been like 3 straight defeats. I think they're in a bit of a slump at the moment. I think there's a team that could do with a striker in the January transfer window, but I think that teams are beginning to suss them out a little bit. And I think if you pack the middle of the pitch and force them out wide and make them play crosses in, they can be quite easy to defend against. I know it's easier said than done, but if you can defend your penalty box well, you can stop Inverness, Caledonian Thistle from doing what they want to do. And I wonder if Scott Kelleher needs to come up with a plan B in order to combat that. As for the other two teams, I know Alloa didn't play at the weekend, but they're in a bit of a slump themselves, having done so well in November and December. But Queen of the South have really got a good look at them last week. I know Stenhousemuir beat them 2-0, but prior to that, I think they'd won 4 games in a row and then followed up that defeat by beating Kelty Hearts. They're a good eye-catching team to watch. Kai Kennedy in one wing, Liam Smith in another. Very difficult players to try and pin down. And you've got like a big bulldozer like Reece Lyon in the middle of the park, someone who can basically just go from box to box, no bother. There's a lot to like about him. And I think with Jordan Allen coming back to fitness, a striker who's missed a lot of game time, I think that by the time he's back in business, they'll be a strong prospect. So I would expect Queens to finish the season quite strongly as well, but there's a lot of good sides at the top end of that table.
And looking at the bottom end of the table, Scott, Cove Rangers, Hamilton, Kelty, they look to be cut adrift, the 3 of them. Who do you see out of those 3 managing to get themselves out of trouble?
I think if Cove can get their players back, every time I see them look at their results and then their bench, it's always really low on numbers. I know Fivey was back at the weekend for them, which I played with Fivey again at Dundee United. Really, really, really good player, been so unfortunate with injuries, but at that level, you'd like to think that he'd come in and make a real difference for them. So I think like you said, it's so tight. Hamilton, obviously, so much going off the field. I can't imagine how it feels to be a player every day, sort of going in there. I know they lost their captain as well, Scott Robinson, going to Arbroath, which will be a massive loss, not just for them on the pitch, but particularly in the dressing room for the boys in there. So that'll be a really, really tough one for them. I think they'd be ones I'd be worrying about at the minute.
Right, well, let's take a look at League Two, lads. And Spartans continue to set the pace, Craig. 8 points clear at the top of the table. What do you think the secret to their success so far has been?
I think the Spartans just do it's a bit of a cliche, but I think the Spartans do the basics very well. You sign big, strong laddies that don't want the ball anywhere near the penalty box. You sign experience in the middle of the park and guys like James Craig and Sean Welsh, and you get fast players up front. And I think if you can bring all those elements together and have the degree of professionalism that Dougie Samuel has brought to that club, it's a recipe for success. I know they weren't playing at the weekend; their game was called off. But prior to that, having quite comfortably beaten Edinburgh City, and then another straightforward win against Dumbarton. I spoke to my friend who was at the match, and he just said, like, teams like East Kilbride have maybe got a higher ceiling, but the Spartans just have that degree of consistency. And he used the term game management. They're perhaps not as emotional as East Kilbride tend to get in some games, that they're not as ill-disciplined, and I think that's probably why the Spartans have got the edge over their rivals.
Yeah, it's a good point that Craig makes, Scott, there about East Kilbride, and we've spoken on this pod this season before about East Kilbride, and they get a lot more maybe attention and media exposure than the other teams in League Two, but perhaps that makes them a bit of a target for opposition teams and maybe get themselves a little bit more up for them. But what have you made of East Kilbride so far this season, and do you think they can kind of reel in Spartans a little bit?
I think they can because of the quality of the squad. I don't think there's a doubt that, you know, they're the sort of big game in town when they do play. I think that in itself can help Spartans alone. You know, lets them go about their business quite quietly when everybody's focused on what East Kilbride are doing or what they're not doing. But in terms of can they catch them, I think so. Yeah, I think they've got a game in hand as well. If they win that, it certainly makes the gap a lot smaller. And as I said, with the quality of the East Kilbride squad, I know Craig's obviously mentioned there about the Spartans squad with like James Craig and Sean Welsh, who are obviously good experienced players. I think in East Kilbride with the boy John Robertson up front as well, I think he's a massive player for them. You know, again, we talk about teams higher up than strikers. Is he one that might get took in January? But also East Kilbride have got a bit of financial backing where they'll probably be able to keep him, particularly when they're so close to the top of the league. So no, it'll be an interesting end to the season. I think Spartans will be delighted with where they are at the minute, and if they can just keep going about their business quietly, they'll be happy.
For all the teams, just getting games played in this weather is the big challenge, isn't it? But you look at the table, Craig, and again, you know, Spartans 8 points clear and in great shape. Lower, just below that, it's all very tight. 6 points separate second and sixth, and you look at the likes of Forfar and Stranraer, and fourth and fifth going along really well, aren't they?
They played each other at the weekend there, and the Stranraer are absolutely kicking themselves that they didn't win that match. They passed up a number of really, really good chances in the game, and ultimately got done with a sucker punch with Forfar Athletic equalising in injury time. So they were really disappointed at it. But I think Stranraer I really like Stranraer. You know, I think that anyone who watches their highlights package, there's so much care and so much love that goes into it. The people behind the scenes do a fantastic job there, and I think I really enjoy watching them. They've got Darren Lang won the December League Two Player of the Month, a boy they signed from Lanark United, quite a scrawny looking guy when they signed him, kind of looked like a street urchin, but over the last couple of seasons since he's developing, he's turning into a really useful striker. You know, he can do a bit of everything, can play with his back to goal, can pop the ball off, can run in behind himself and score. Guys like Dom Plank, who's coming on loan from Heart of Midlothian, he's had quite an exciting player, and big Lewis Reid at the back. All really good players at Stranraer. I think it's the youngest squad as well in the SPFL. I think their manager might have said that. So there's a lot of good stuff going for them. And I think for Stranraer, having finished bottom of the table and then just narrowly avoiding it the previous season, I think for them it's to try and finish up as high as possible. So I think if I had to pick any team that I wanted to win it, it would be Stranraer, but I think that's unlikely. I do think they have got what it takes to finish in the top four. And
there's nothing more heartwarming in football than the journey from street urchin to top class footballer. That's what we all like to see in the game. But Scott, Edinburgh City still rooted to the bottom, and if you've listened to Craig on this podcast throughout this season, he was adamant that they would lift off at some stage and fly up the table, and who knows, maybe they still will, but they're still down there. How do you see them? Are they going to get themselves going and get up that table sooner rather than later?
Yes, in short. I agree with Craig. Yeah, I think when I was on before as well, I said the same thing. You know, again, Michael Backendall, I don't know him, but he comes across really, really well in his interviews. I actually listened to his interview after the game was still in at the weekend there, and it's probably the most annoyed that I've heard him. He actually said that in his interview, that he was annoyed, he was frustrated. He speaks of how dominant they were, how dominant they've been in a lot of games, particularly in the first half, and then they've just, for whatever reason, in the second half, things have just not went their way, and they've gone to lose games. So I think that's something that has to be a concern for him. He did say, obviously, about the injuries that they've got at the minute, which, you know, every manager, unfortunately, will go through that stage. But I think, if you look at it, I think only the top two have won more games in the league. So that in itself sort of shows you just how good they are, because to go and lose 15 points none of your own fault in terms of the playing side of it, to then pick yourself up and still go and win. I think it's 7 games they've won this season, and get yourself close to the pack that you're chasing. He spoke as well a couple of times, 3 or 4 games where they had a chance to go within 2 points of Dumbarton or whoever's above them, and they sort of he called it, bottled it in his interview. So that'll not be great for his players to hear. But yeah, I still fancy them going a little run and certainly get themselves away from the bottom of the league, close to the playoff.
The big thing about Edinburgh, though, is just I can't fathom it that their home record's terrible. Their home record's the worst in division. If their away record, they have won as many points as the Spartans. The joint top points total for in terms of away form. They've got the worst home form, only 6 points being picked up at Meadowbank. Won there once all season. So I can't explain why. I mean, it's not like you're going to Galatasaray. It's not like Welcome to Hell or anything like that. So I just don't understand why they're not able to win the games at home. So it's a worry. They're coming up. They've got Annan Athletic and then Dumbarton, two of the teams who are around them. That Dumbarton game's huge. That feels like a massive 6-pointer. That game in a couple of weeks' time. So that's one to keep an eye on.
Yep, big games keep coming in League 2 and throughout the lower leagues, lads. It's been a real pleasure to talk to you this morning. Thanks to Scott and to Craig, and thanks to you for listening. Remember, we're here with new episodes of the Scottish Football Podcast bright and early every day, so to make sure you don't miss out, subscribe on BBC Sounds and have push notifications turned on your phone. But for now, from Craig, from Scott and from me, thanks for listening.
It's petty, it's ill-informed.
Are President Trump's cuts having an adverse effect on research?
It's pandemonium.
What number's that in the periodic table?
PD, number 47. I don't know.
I've done the shooting clays before. The longer you do it, the shorter obviously it gets.
When Craig said there he'd been shooting the clays, I imagined him out a back line. Somebody's washing, you know.
William Shatner, his secretary, contacted me to say, when Bill has a question now and again, can he contact you? And then one time he called me up and he wanted to know, David, what is a photon? I'm thinking, this is incredible. Captain Kirk wants to know what a photon is, you know.
I once met a guy who referred to a globe as a ball map. A ball map.
A ball map. Look at the ball map.
What we normally do is spin the ball map and we see where we go on holiday.
The Off the Ball podcast, available every Monday on BBC Sounds.